All right. Good morning, everyone. Hope you had your morning Colombian coffee. If not, this is your last chance before we start. So I'm really glad to be here and happy to see a full room for what I think it's one of the most important questions of these days. It's really how to build strategies to engage in different kinds of markets, of carbon markets. We have different kinds of carbon markets for different purposes as well. And so how are host countries thinking about this will be the topic of the session. So as Fernando was saying, I work at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions. It's a think tank in Washington, D.C., and we are part, as an organization, along with AIDA as well, of the Executive Secretariat for the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Market, ICVCM. And so we've actually had the pleasure to have the PMI come in one of our working sessions of the ICVCM as we are exploring different ways of aligning the standard to the Paris Agreement in different aspects, including corresponding adjustments. So I have a distinguished set of panelists here. I will introduce them as I go and ask them a few questions. First, I'd like to very briefly give you a few considerations of maybe how countries are starting to think about the role of engaging in different markets. So there's different considerations, including market conditions, so price of the mitigation unit and the cost, including transaction costs of participating to one market or the other. When I speak about different markets, just to be on the same page, would be domestic compliance carbon markets, but also international compliance carbon markets like under Article 6, and of course, voluntary carbon markets. So there's the price of the unit, the cost of engaging in the markets, including opportunity costs and transaction costs, maybe potential levies that are associated to different mechanisms. There's also considerations in terms of mitigation co-benefits. So there might be ways of participating in certain markets that can leverage positive SDG impacts, but also enhance likelihoods and accelerate technology transfer or even develop supply chains, local supply chains. Then there's considerations, I would say, regarding NDC ambition and implementation. So in terms of implementation, for instance, if an NDC is conditional to external sources of finance, countries may want to open up the market to international investors, including through carbon credits. In terms of ambition, there's a lot that can be said, but one of maybe the concerns that has been raising in conversations of, for instance, application of corresponding adjustments is that may cause, that could cause an incentive to actually keep the ambition of NDCs relatively low. This is one concern that's been raised. On the other hand, if an NDC is way too ambitious, some of the effort that the countries are trying to do to establish policies may be kind of delegated to private participants in the VCM. So there's a few considerations to be made in terms of ambition and implementation of NDCs. And then another point is demand. Like there's not going to be a market if we don't have both sides of it functioning well. So what's the appetite of investors for one market or the other, and what are the goals that they need to accomplish is another consideration to be taken. So with this, I'm going to be starting with a few questions for our panelists. So I've got Kazu as our first panelist of the day. He's the director of the Article 6 Implementation Partnership. And so Kazu, one of the questions for you is based on your experience under the GCM and your A6 IP. What are the key strategies that countries could adopt or already adopting that can address the challenges that I've laid out before? And how is the Article 6 Implementation Partnership helping assess all these different elements? If you could tell us. briefly.
Thank you, Katarina. And of course, that's a big question and for long answers. But I wanted to maybe share a few experience or maybe some knowledge. Again, this is a partnership and knowledge sharing and all the practitioners. And I also wanted to share a maybe few slides to get started. So maybe next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So I think, yeah, Katarina, you mentioned about the key strategies, and also this is about the topic of participate and not to participate. And I, from the at least the Article 6 point of view, the Article 6, Paragraph 1, this is the essence. This is the essence of the Article 6, Paragraph 1, which is to really intend to implement and enhance the NDC, which is the ambition. So of course, many countries, now all the countries have NDC, so the interest and the benefit is to really implement and even enhance NDC. And also, there is to promote sustainable development of the country. So definitely, this is something for the consideration of the country, how this Article 6 or carbon market could contribute. And also ensuring environmental integrity. So this is about the participation and also consideration when it comes to the Article 6 context. Of course, we have a voluntary market, but also we have Article 6 context, maybe compliance. But all of this is we are talking about is implementation of NDC, Paris Agreement towards net zero, and I think yesterday we talked about the integrity issues. So at least from our point of view, I think when it comes to the consideration of participate, I think these are the basic principles that will apply to all the countries. So with that, next slide I may go into. So I think maybe I'm just to kind of point into some of the important area authorization, but this will also entails to basically the decision of the country to participate or even the authorize some of the projects to be under Article 6 context. So we kind of summarize 3 points on this. So we need to make sure the authorizations ensures the mitigation activity contributes to implementation of the country's NDC. So of course, you have a NDC and scope and some technologies, etc. So I think countries need to also ensure those, how the project will contribute to the NDC. And the second point is, maybe this is also another area, how these, the authorized unit or activities will not undermine the achievement of NDC. Of course, maybe for this, we need to have some modeling, we need to have some estimation. I think this is also the important area where the countries decide. And the last part is this, the requirement of the reporting and tracking. And this is really to avoid double counting to ensure environmental integrity. And of course, when it comes to the environmental integrity, there are many areas when it comes to the baseline setting and all the already defined in the Article 6.2. But I think from the country context, maybe host countries as well, they need to ensure those areas to be ensured. So next slide. I just wanted to give you some content. Maybe you can maybe later on take a look more. We have already some examples out there. They also kind of identify how this NDC related. And some countries also look at technology as one of the eligibility criteria. And also they are also looking at some financial aspects in terms of how much amount, because of the benefit that they are also getting. And also environmental integrity, the country also looking at to what extent they just to make sure this also will be comply 6.2 rules. Of course, many countries are understanding how this could entail. But I think we have already seen some initial reports submitted. They have already kind of elaborated those explanation. So this environment integrity area. And of course, as I mentioned, it's a sustainable development. It's a shall promote sustainable development. So they need to ensure this project will contribute to their own sustainable development. Some countries also mention like safeguards and human rights. As yesterday, we also had some discussion around this. And also some MRV standard and maybe share mitigation barriers. So I think the countries, based on the principle that we have, like contribute to the NDC, sustainable development, ensure environment integrity, you can also look into more details about what kind of criteria, what kind of benefit that you could consider when it comes to the participating or when it comes to the really authorizing some of those projects. So I think those, maybe this is something very important to kind of share. Again, these are coming from those countries. And then basically we can learn from each other. And then how to implement this is something we can also think about. So I just wanted to share some of the experience that we have. So we are also supporting the countries to really first understanding what the rules are, Article 6, and also providing some kind of experiences from the other countries, but also think about from your country's context, your agency, how you wanted to use Article 6 in a way to really enhance and promote sustainable development and also ensure environment integrity. And we have some guidebook. This is kind of putting from our guidebook. So we are happy to share this guidebook and then try to support capacity building together with UNFCCC, together with the World Bank. I think this is our kind of approach to support for other partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kazu. Very interesting. How many countries do you have in the partnership now?
So now we have 79 countries, and we are start kind of engaging with the countries, and now we have 25 plus to start engaging. And we are also coordinating with World Bank and Secretariat to really synergize for this approach.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I think coordination is key. Okay, Adriana. Adriana Gutierrez from Colombia. She's an Article 6 negotiator, Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Colombia. Yeah, I have a few questions for you pertaining a little bit the market setup in Colombia regarding the tax scheme. So there's a certain amount of credits that can be offsets and can be adopted or accepted by the carbon tax scheme. And so my question for you is, how is Colombia balancing domestic participants' interests in generating offsets for domestic compliance purpose versus international compliance or voluntary markets? If you could answer that one first.
That one is a pretty good and difficult question. Well, in Colombia, we have like different elements interacting. We have, as you said, the carbon neutrality mechanism and the carbon tax, which has a national voluntary carbon market. We are currently working on regulating this voluntary carbon market because obviously we didn't expect at some point that the market was going to be that big as it is right now. You already saw like some figures and numbers in Colombia are quite big, and therefore we have already seen that we need to improve what we already have in place. And then we also will have we expect from next year, we will have our Colombian ETS, so it means that we will have another market, a compliance market. And this one will have to interact at some point with the tax. It has some points of interaction. We are already working on that, and we expect to release this year our decree for public consultation, so soon. And then it comes the other two markets, the international voluntary carbon market and the Article 6. So for us, each of them is really different, has different rules, functions in a different way. And that's why we are trying to have the rules in place for each one of them so that they are specifically differentiated. Because, for example, the requirements that we are asking for the carbon neutrality mechanisms are less constrictive than the ones that we will ask for Article 6, because Article 6, as we have said in many spaces, for us, Article 6 is like the gourmet units of the market, so they have to have a higher quality, and therefore for higher quality the standards are higher than the normal market. And also because Article 6 asks for many more things that the normal market, for example, the alignment with the long-term strategy, the revision of the baselines, everything is different. And even the standards should comply with that. Right now, we don't see that any standard internationally, at least for the Colombian case, responds to the requirements that Colombia needs for the standards and methodologies out there, because they are right now responding to the international voluntary carbon market, but not for Article 6. And Colombia has, and I think you have heard, Colombia has a really high ambition NDC, in which we have to reduce 51% of our emissions in 2030. So that means that our rules for Article 6 as a nation have to be really clear in order for us to decide what goes where, what can go into the carbon neutrality mechanism, what goes into the national ETS, what could go into international voluntary carbon market, and what can go into Article 6. And that's some planning that we have been doing up to this point, because we also have some other ways of financing, because for us carbon markets is just one of the many options that the country could have. So we have been trying to make this really strategic planning and see what are the higher fruits, hanging fruits. So the higher hanging fruits are the ones that really should go into Article 6, having into account that we have to do the corresponding adjustment. While we could have many low-hanging fruits that we could just work nationally instead of making them go into the market. And those are the things that we have been revising so far. I guess that in terms of legislation, we have not voiced out many things out there, but we are working on different pieces of legislation, such as clarifying these differences that I already stated. That's not something that a normal civilian can understand. They will think that everything is the same, that the credit is the same, that the permit, that the CERs are the same, that the IDMOs. That's something that the people out there don't understand as different. And we also have people here that are speaking on carbon bonds, and we are like, yeah, no, that's not a carbon bond, we're talking about carbon credit. So let's start talking what's the difference between a bond and a credit, and the difference with the IDMO. And those are the things that we have been trying to work. We even have a communication strategy. We have given webinars and given information to the citizens, because they are the ones that are implementing, not necessarily the government. Is that, like, I think I already said like the most information, and if anyone would like to have more information on this, I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Adriana. Just one follow-up question is Colombia trying to use voluntary carbon markets then in its jurisdiction, or not quite?
Colombia is using the national voluntary carbon market and the international voluntary carbon market. Okay. They are using it. I mean, not as Colombia as a state, but the actors. We have many stakeholders. We have projects that when they try to come into, for example, the carbon tax, the carbon neutrality mechanism of the carbon tax, they cannot participate because, for example, they don't have a baseline. So they go into the international voluntary carbon market, because in the international voluntary carbon market, they are not asking for national baselines, for example, so that you couple the project baseline with the national baseline.
So tell me a little bit about these, or what you're thinking about, since it's still under development, about eligibility criteria in terms of integrity, if you will, for Colombia's neutrality program, carbon neutrality, or the tax offsetting
the
scheme?
tax?
Yes, yes.
Well, we already have many rules in place in terms of integrity. However, we have been trying to improve certain things that could have been a little bit ambiguous to the actors. We have right now the resolution 1447. I'm just trying to think of the number in English, sorry. But the resolution is so long and so extensive, and it has so many elements that sometimes the people, when they try to read it, they don't understand it completely. So we are going to clarify that. So if you ask me on elements, you can have integrity elements in terms of technical elements, but integrity elements as well on social and environmental safeguards, right? Those are the things that you have to have in place in order for the market to have complete integrity. So in terms of technical work, we have been working on differentiating additionality for each one of the markets. So not only for the carbon tax, but for all of them. If we are already doing one, let's do everything. Validation and verification processes. We are also going to start working on baselines and standards and methodologies, just so that for all the actors it is clear enough what the methodology for the national market is and what for the Article 6 is, because there are clear differences, for example. And then in terms of social and environmental safeguards, that's something that Colombian, and I guess that everybody here may have heard our minister talking about this because she have voiced it out quite a lot, and it is that the most of the issues that we have in the voluntary carbon market nationally, well, I think our statistics is that most of the issues are for the projects that have been sold outside, not the projects that are sold inside. There are also some issues inside, but most of the problems are outside. And these projects, normally, they are going against the national safeguards for the communities. So we are right now working in different kind of strategies. One, like response strategy, because there are issues already. So we have to try to tackle those issues. And with that, we are working with universities to help the communities to go to court and all of that procedures that are outside the boundary of the Ministry of Environment. But also we are working on a preemptive strategy that involves the creation of the legislation for the social and environmental safeguards for communities, and not only for RED Plus projects, because when we talk about social and environmental safeguard, we like do this direct connection with RED Plus, right? But that's not true. That should apply to any kind of project. So we are working on how we are going to expand this concept into all kinds of projects. We have already started with AFOLU projects at least, which are like the nearest one to us. But we are planning on expanding it to other kind of projects, like sectorial, like energy, transport, and all of that, because we already have had at least one experience of a wind project, with energy project that was inside a community, and the community already like said, no, I don't like that. Why are you doing that without asking me first, and that kind of things. So it means that we also have to work all the other projects having into account these social and environmental safeguards. And
yeah, thank you, Adriana. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll come back to the integrity issue and how different actors are also trying to put heads and heart into streamlining integrity for the markets in general. So, all right, let's go to Nirwan. Hi, Nirwan is Deputy Chief Economist at the Fiscal and Economics Division of the Ministry of Finance of Malaysia. Okay, so what are the key provisions within the legislation of Malaysia that support carbon markets development? And how do you see the potential with respect to forest projects specifically in Malaysia, and how these can address what Adriana was saying, like community aspects of the projects? Yeah, starting with those two.
Right, thank you for the question, Catalina. First of all, I'd like to thank the World Bank for having me here. It's a privilege, actually, to be part of the expert community on carbon market. To answer your question, we don't really have a law, a dedicated law on carbon market, but we do have sectoral laws and legislations related to, let's say, forestry and the green assets that we have. But to tell you the truth, because of the structure of the Federation of Malaysia, that land matters are within the purview of the state governments. So coming from the federal government, from the Ministry of Finance, and also those who are working at the Ministry of Environment, at this current juncture, it is a challenge for us to bring the state government to be aligned with the targets that we have set for our NDC attainment, and also on the long-term commitment towards 2050 net zero emission. So what we are doing currently is to have regular engagement with state actors and agencies within the state, because some of the states are moving ahead of what the plan that is being formulated by the federal government. I have to basically accept that notion, because we have been talking about establishing the carbon market in Malaysia for maybe 4 to 5 years ago, at least when we were preparing for the for COP26 in Glasgow. But the states have not been seeing real development happening on the ground, at least. So like one of the states, Sarawak state that we have on the Borneo Island, they're very active in pushing for greening the economy of the state, going towards low carbon footprints, encouraging the industries to transition. So they are basically putting the pressure on the federal government to start the ball rolling. So thanks to the PMI team for the project. So at least the PMI implementation in Malaysia has basically pushed everyone to be on their toes, especially the really relevant agencies, not only the Ministry of Environment, but also us, the Ministry of Finance, and also the private sector, the exchanges, the central bank, etc., to work together to ensure that the whole of nation approach is undertaken while we are developing our carbon market. Thank you.
Thank you. So are you, I'm aware that Malaysia is going to be the Asian chair for 2025. And so is there any sort of, well, you were already sort of hinting to it, but a regional approach to the use of international carbon markets in Asia that you're trying to promote?
All right. On our preparation for the ASEAN Chairmanship in 2025, basically, one of the pillars that will be discussed next year is about just transition. So under this pillar, we basically we have broken it down into around 4 areas, and basically we have not really pinned down whether there will be any discussion about coming up with a regional cooperation on carbon market, but it may be embedded in one of the deliverables, especially when we're talking about the existing work program that is already established when we're talking about ASEAN taxonomy in terms of climate financing, when we're talking about the financing through the capital market. But we still have time, maybe another 6 months to work on the program for ASEAN. So there was a proposal for us to just come up with a common ASEAN framework on carbon market, just to make sure all the 10 ASEAN members aware of the importance of the carbon market, because we have Singapore, which is way advanced than the rest, and we also have some least developed ASEAN member countries who have not really have anything on carbon market. They have not started thinking about this, but these countries may be affected, especially for Malaysia. We know basically most of our ASEAN member countries are exporting to the EU, so they may be imposed by CBAM by 2026, etc. So that is one of the threats that we may think that is one of the international pressures that we have to take into account to make sure all the ASEAN members are fully prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, super interesting. So you are thinking about how to create capacity in terms of carbon pricing policy. You mentioned the PMI. What is the role you see for Article 6 and the VCM besides compliance regimes that could be developed in Asia?
So currently, Malaysia has already established the voluntary carbon market. We call it Bursa Carbon Exchange, BCX. But we have not made a decision yet whether to basically implement ETS or a carbon tax. It will depend on the final outcome of the PMI project. But basically, the work that we are doing under PMI, I wish to congratulate the PMI team and all the consultants for basically, like I said before, pushing everyone to really think and work together, providing the right data, doing all the modeling exercises, looking into the impact on the economy, the GDP, prices, distribution of income, expenditure, etc. So we have got all this all the information required for us to put up a good case to the government to make a decision soon. So that's why currently the Ministry of Environment are doing a few things in parallel, especially to come up with they're drafting the bill of for climate change, and also they're doing they're drafting a new policy on carbon market. Then they're currently in preparation to announce the updated NDC targets. So all these things are basically good signs for Malaysia. And when you're talking about whether there is any decision yet for Malaysia to be involved in Article 6, it all depends on the policy that will come out. But based on the data and our current projection, it seems that we may be able to achieve our NDC by 2030. So there is a possibility for us to be able to be involved in Article 6, but there must be some control so that we have the projection, but before we can commit on which projects are supposed to come under Article 6, which projects should be let for the voluntary market to manage, we really have to make sure that the newly approved Act on Climate Change will be able to ensure that the infrastructure, the governance that will govern the carbon market, basically will not push the country away from our commitment. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Fernando, how are we doing on time? How much do we have? 5 minutes. Okay. We have time for questions also from the audience or speakers as well. If you want to ask each other questions, how does this work? Maybe, do we have a roving mic? Yeah. 2 questions. Okay, yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Adriana, a question. You mentioned that standards, we're not ready for the integrity that Colombia is seeking. So it would be very interesting for us to participate in a conversation with the government to see what type of changes and improvements we need to make for comply with the requirements of Colombia, and just to say that we are open to do that, not only with Colombia, but with other governments. And also, and maybe you could mention if you have some ideas of what specific things we need to improve, but I know this it's maybe a difficult question. And also maybe a question for all of the panelists. We have been speaking a lot about safeguards, specifically for the AFOLU and RED projects in all of the countries. Is there any advance on maybe a system where projects could report the safeguards, how they're applying that, so it would be maybe easier to track these for different projects and initiatives?
Okay, I will be short because I think you also answered the question. When we start working on that, we expect to open the discussion with external stakeholders such as you guys. And in case of what things you might already start revising, the baselines, that's something that
Sorry, but just for RED, because the other baselines are okay, right?
I think there has to be a revision for everything, just in case, because not all the standards have the same way of working. And also specifically in RED Plus, we are seeing that there is still some work to do in the cases of alignment with the FRAIL. So those are things that will have to be revised. Is it still baselines? But yeah. And then on the second question, what was the second question that you made to all of us? Sorry.
Sorry. About a reporting system of safeguards for projects in general.
Right. Well, in Colombia, we have been working on the RIS, which is the safeguards registry system. Reporting system. It's still not yet public. It's on work, and I'm not specifically part of the team that is involved directly into this development, but I know that they are developing right now. And also things that I know worldwide have been developed, and I guess Kazu can talk about that more, is the SD tool of the 6.4 agreement, Article 6, so the accreditation mechanism for the Paris Agreement. They are working on that, and we have revised it. At least at Colombia, we can say that there are many things that can be taken from this tool that is being developed by the subsidiary body. We see that there are many things that could also taken by other countries, but I guess Kazu can speak more on that since he's part of the SB. But yeah, that on my side so that the others can also use the mic.
As far as I know from the forestry department in Malaysia, um, for the RED Plus, we have not received much of assistance because Malaysia practices, sustainable forest management. So we still keep at least 50% of our forest coverage through the Gazette of Permanent Reserve Forests. So that alone will not eligible Malaysia to receive any financial assistance, I think. So, but it's fine so far. So we hope. I don't know whether the effort that we have taken through government instruction or government directive will also be considered in the future for the government to be able to receive, any financial assistance for us to engage in other developmental projects for greening the economy. Thank you.
Okay, maybe one more question. Okay, I think the gentleman on the right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexis Leroy for Yeta BPMI. So the question goes to all three panelists. We're talking about just transition. I was wondering if there's a price mechanism or a price consideration that integrates such tools that would ensure a just transition from a host country point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, Kazu.
I don't know. Maybe just to also respond to previous questions. I think maybe just safeguard is something that the government itself can also regulate. So maybe some country can specifically kind of require project participant to address safeguard. In addition, I think Article 6.2, if you are also follow the Article 6.2 rule, you need to also, the government needs to ensure the safeguard to be addressed. And also the same things in terms of the 6.4 mechanisms concerned, sustainable development tool, which is now the mandatory for all the projects to follow to ensure sustainable development to ensure, including the addressing this safeguard in the context of the country. So it is sort of requirement for the project participant to address, but at the same time they need to explain to the government internally, but at the same time internationally. The just transition, I'm also catching up discussions, but I understand there is also like a phase out of some of the fossil fuel plant, and there is also attempt to like apply some crediting mechanism to which to a certain extent I think price consideration could be applied. So I understand there are some attempt to apply this price to the kind of a carbon price to the just transition. So.
Okay, on just transition, basically we have not decided on the actual price that we will use when establishing our ETS or carbon tax. But basically, through the PMI study, we've seen a few scenarios. The first one is the lowest range, which is around $25, which is the minimum expected price based on the one provided by IMF. That basically will help in terms of the price of goods and services in the country will not be increased too much, and it will basically contribute in terms of stabilizing, not pushing or providing a lot of shocks into the economy when we start to implement it. And but if we go to the next scenario, which is around $50, it will provide a bit of push to even industries to start doing a lot of innovation and try to switch the utilization of or the usage of fuels from fossil to renewable energy sources. So it will basically encourage more investment in the economy. So we are looking at this one because based on what Singapore is doing or what is the projection that the carbon price will be in 2035. And so the other extreme, which is the highest, or the next scenario will be the carbon price of $100, which is the expected price set by the EU in 2035. So that one will even push the transition process a bit faster. But we don't know whether, looking at how the economy works, Malaysia would have the capacity to catch up with it. We are thinking it may put a lot of pressure on all the actors within the country, even though when we see the projection of GHG emission reduction, it will provide the best scenario for Malaysia to adopt. So looking at all the three scenarios, I think currently the consultant is proposing for Malaysia to take the second one, which is at $50 at in 2035. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. A question that I don't have, and we don't have the time to answer now, is like, is there any avenue for voluntary carbon markets to start off the process of a just transition in countries that do not have yet carbon pricing policy in place? How can that support the next round of regulation, so to speak, by adopting, for example, jurisdictional approaches which are used in the VCM? So I will not try to answer that one, but maybe we can think about it in the next sessions. Thank you all. Our time's up, and yeah, see you soon.